Go get a drink of water.
All right, it's on. I think. Let me check my phone. I think it's on. Let's double check.
See Joan. Where's Joan?
This is a live.
Oh, I feel like people are walking around.
So you gotta talk pretty much in that. Right in front of them. You could talk at the podium too, and like facing.
No.
Facing the crowd.
Okay. Well, people are still coming in.
Yeah. Hello. It's live.
Hi.
It's live.
It's like,
They can. Can hear everything, just, so that's really loud what we say.
should we close the door?
Want me to close the
Oh, thank you.
Joan, do you have a speaker of some kind?
There's a mic here. I hope it's, we'll see what happens. Let me know if you can't hear me. Okay, first I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself, how I ended up doing this, and some information to get you up to date on what's actually happening in Brookfield and in general with electromagnetic frequencies, wireless radiation. My name is Joan Polzin. I live in Candlewood Shores and I've been a Brookfield resident for 42 years. My personal journey has led me to what I have been trying to do as an activist for the past 4 years. My daughter was diagnosed with a form of brain cancer in 2009 called glioblastoma. She was 38 years old. She passed away a year and a half later. This cancer is incurable. She was a beautiful and special person, loved by her husband, family, friends, and coworkers. She wanted to know why this was happening to her. She was fit. She was doing power yoga and Pilates and eating well. She worked in New York City for Sirius Radio as a supervisor for their website. Prior to her move to New York City, she had a high-level jobs with Microsoft and Yahoo in California, where technology and cell phones were already a part of daily life earlier than in the East. While she was ill, we were visiting her in her Manhattan apartment. Friends and family were there for her every day, and she asked, "Do you think it could have been the cell phone?" Everyone said no. They wouldn't sell them if they did that. She passed away in 2011, shortly before her 40th birthday. It wasn't until 2018 that I learned about a huge and significant study recently completed by the National Toxicology Program under the auspices of our government on cancer and cell phone radiation. It cost between $25 and $30 million. They worked on it for 10 years. In the last 2 years, they did an animal study. The specific outcomes were clear evidence of schwannomas, heart tumors, they're called schwannomas, and some evidence of brain cancer, gliomas, evidence of adrenal gland tumors, and more. These are rare the gliomas and the schwannomas are rare primary brain cancers primary cancers because they're not metastasized from another cancer in the body. And they're pretty rare, or they used to be. They're still kind of rare, but they had been increasing
What's that?
like doubling every year when the people kept the cell phones next to their ears. Now things have changed. However, I understand the teenagers sleep on their cell phones, so I don't know how much they've changed, but this is just particularly about cell phones, right, so far. Animal studies are predictive of cancer in people. This revelation led me to a deep dive into learning about EMFs and health. I have 2 master's degrees, but I think I spent more time educating myself about this topic than any other. Then I learned about the new rollout of 5G. I was doing reading a lot of books, watching a lot of documentaries, looking at science articles, and when I found out about this 5G, at that time it was new to me, and I learned that this level of radiation was to go into the microwave level of the electromagnetic spectrum, and that is when, that's what got me started going to town meetings for 2 years and trying to stop the reckless rollout of this equipment in Brookfield. They were fruitless efforts. But there have been some big changes and very positive changes since the pandemic. Our current government is aware of the harmful health effects of EMFs and is dedicated to protecting the health and welfare of Brookfield residents. However, the pressure from the state and the industry to blanket every inch of Connecticut with telecom infrastructure is enormous. We want to control the reckless expansion of this infrastructure in our town to protect ourselves and our children from future additions to the already adequate telecom grid, and from more and more ever-present radiation near our homes, schools, and other public places. Additional towers, antennas, and 5G small cells will create an inescapable radiation 24/7. 5G small cells will be very close to each other. That's the only way they can really work. They don't go well through trees and things like that, so they're cutting down all the trees on the highways. And there will be no escape. This affects us all, not just humans, but every living thing, including wildlife, pets, birds, bees, trees, all life. We currently have an imminent situation in Brookfield pending a decision from the Siting Council of Connecticut in a few days regarding a new cell tower to be located on Vale Road near several neighborhoods and daycare centers. If the Vale Road tower is approved by the Siting Council, we are planning to proceed with a court case to regain our rightful local control of the town's infrastructure, including telecom, which has been stripped from us by the Siting Council, a state agency. We are the only state in the country that has 2 state agencies to bypass, and these are not elected people, to bypass local government. So we have a little bit of an extra challenge here, maybe a lot. The process that's going on now is illegal and unconstitutional. If you would like to learn more about the health effects of cell towers in particular, at the end of this meeting, we put up some papers on the wall so people could take photos and then go to the website and pursue reading the whole article instead of having to print so many. So there it is over there with the blue cell tower, and there's one over there. And that's a really good article, specifically on cell towers, with 70 citations of scientific studies that have been done of the effects of cell towers. So these are not animal studies. These are real life. We're asking for more Brookfield residents to support our efforts. One way you can do this is by attending our board meetings, Board of Selectmen meeting on the first Monday night of each month, and simply showing support. Tonight we will be showing several short videos addressing various issues related to wireless radiation. I'd like to turn the meeting over to Gwen and Austin, who are going to show us the videos and introduce them. And then Austin will be speaking on the effects of cell towers on property values. Following Austin, we'll take questions from the audience. I would like to thank everyone who worked on putting together tonight's presentation, and a big thank you to our audience for coming tonight to learn about the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. We're going to do a few videos. They're not long, so they're very informative. And the first one we decided should be Senator Blumenthal. And this is a short video. It's around 5 minutes. And he is speaking at the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee hearing. He raises concerns on 5G wireless potential health risk. So, if Austin, you would begin.
Yeah. I'm just gonna turn off the lights for the live feed. That's cool. So you can see the video better. But all right, here we go.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having this hearing. We've heard from a lot of witnesses from you today and others previously about the very important potential of 5G technology. It promises to bring us a new era of connectivity with internet speeds as much as 5 times faster than what we have today, with much lower latency, and that's all a good thing. But 5G, as you well know, also uses higher frequency waves that don't travel as far and will rely on a network of hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of small cell sites. And the question then is, are there any health implications, any public safety implications to those additional sites that are likely to be located close to homes, schools, workplaces, and closer to the ground? Correct?
Correct, Senator. Yes.
So in December of 2018, I sent a letter to FCC Commissioner Carr asking him to cite for me recent scientific studies demonstrating the safety of this technology. What research has been done, where has it been published and compiled? He has essentially failed to do so, and just echo the general statements of the FDA, which shares regulatory responsibility for cell phones with the FCC. If you go to the FDA website, pretty unsatisfactory. There basically is a cursory and superficial citation to existing scientific data saying, quote, the FDA has urged the cell phone industry to take a number of steps, including support additional research on possible biological effects of radio frequency fields for the type of signal emitted by cell phones. I believe that Americans deserve to know what the health effects are, not to prejudge what scientific studies may show, and they deserve also a commitment to do the research on outstanding questions. So my question for you, particularly Mr. Gillen and Mr. Berry, how much money has the industry committed to supporting additional independent research? I stress independent research. Is that independent research ongoing? Has any been completed? Where can consumers look for it? And we're talking about research on the biological effects of this new technology.
Thank you, Senator. I think, thank you for your focus on the issue. Safety is paramount, and as you alluded to, we rely on the expert agencies, we rely on the findings of the FDA and others as to the requirements to keep all of us safe. There are no industry-backed studies, to my knowledge right now. Happy to visit with you as to what opportunities you think there needs to be more studies, and we're always for more science. We also rely on what the scientists tell us.
So essentially, the answer to my question, how much money? Zero.
I can certainly follow up with you, Senator. To my knowledge, there's no active studies being backed by industry today.
Anybody else know of industry commitments to back research, fund it, support it, to ascertain scientifically the health effect?
Senator, I'm not aware either, but I do know that with small cells especially, you're going to have lower power levels. And of course, as from a carrier perspective, you want to be able to manage interference so that that interference is the lowest interference possible. So I would think that some of those studies or some of that information could be utilized in looking at health consequences. But no, I'm not aware of any.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here, so far as health and safety is concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, as he said, in 2018, he sent a letter to the FCC Commissioner,
Are you a heroic?
Commissioner Carr, requesting citation of scientific studies demonstrating the safety of 5G and the expansion of antennas and towers. So the FCC has failed to provide evidence. We're kind of flying blind as far as health and safety. Brookfield's Tara Carr, our select woman Tara Carr, who's with us tonight, has similarly sought evidence of safety before subjecting Brookfield to the tower's microwave radiation, yet no evidence has been provided. So conversely, there exists decades of scientific evidence proving substantial harm as a result of this radioactive radiation toxin. And I believe she wrote to Blumenthal, yes? And isn't it interesting that she's not heard from him? And isn't it interesting that our governor is pushing more and more towers and antennas on Connecticut? So our next video is by 5G Crisis, and it's called Why 5G Isn't an Upgrade. Get some light.
What? Sure.
When? Could I add a little something?
Yes.
It's something interesting happened very recently. The Children's Health Defense sued the FCC to update their standards. The allowable emissions in our country were set in 1996, when we had very different technology, and they weren't really set with very good studies or planning anyway. So actually, the court found against the FCC and told them that they need. Oh, and the interesting thing is that 11,000 studies were presented at that court case. 11,000 studies. Yes, and yeah, and still they haven't done it, even though they were court ordered. And we have, if you look at a graph of emission allowances in Europe and different countries, and we have like the highest emission allowances. They're just out of sight. So I just wanted to add that they accomplished that, and everybody knows that the FCC is out of line, and we don't have no protection. So thanks.
So 5G shortwave requires smaller antennas. They're also called nodes, and they're required every 150 to 300 feet in order to relay signals. This means a huge expansion of antennas and towers throughout all neighborhoods. 5G cannot be turned down, nor can it be turned off. So it's 24/7 of beaming radiation into homes, schools, hospitals, and businesses. Number 3, this is a cell phone tower radiation pollution. It's a woman named Blake Levitt who's speaking at U.S. Congressional Staff Briefing. Blake Levitt is a Connecticut resident. She is a Connecticut-based award-winning journalist who specialized in medical and science research for the past 30 years. Her research and publishing focus on biological effects of electromagnetic fields and microwave radiation. She's a very renowned speaker. She speaks on the environmental effects of non-ionizing radiation. You hear about ionizing and non-ionizing, and we hear that it's ionizing radiation that causes the problems, but it's also non-ionizing radiation. She has participated in congressional hearings, helped craft legislation, and appeared in 4 documentaries. So this is about 10 minutes, but it's
a pleasure to be with you.
Informative.
There's very little time allotted to all the speakers, so I'm going to get right to the point. We likely have a looming health problem on our hands with radio frequency radiation. It's called RF, and it's emitted from all wireless technologies. This includes both consumer products and infrastructure issues, everything from cell and cordless phones, cell towers, Wi-Fi internet, wireless computer systems in schools and homes, WiMAX, radio frequency ID tags, and a host of other high-tech products. The continuing unfettered use of this kind of radiation needs much closer scrutiny. People assume that these technologies are safe, but at the federal level there is almost no government research today, and most of the regulatory agencies have had their programs completely eviscerated. A whole area of important expertise is being lost just when we need it most. Almost all of the research on RF is now coming from Europe, and it's coming from Asia. We're falling far behind. No one is protected in the U.S. today from long-term, low-level exposures to RF, which is what we mostly experience. It's called electrosmog, and it's a form of energetic air pollution. One study in Europe a few years back found that the background RF in urban areas had increased by a factor of over 3,000% in just a 10-year period. Cell technology likely accounts for the rise that they measured. U.S. cities are thought to be comparable, if not higher. That, by anyone's reckoning, is an altered environment. We're essentially experimenting on people without their consent. There are exposure standards in place, but they are controversial and they're obsolete. Debate on this, by the way, is not new. It goes all the way back to World War II, when the U.S. Bureau of Ships first noticed that midshipmen developed cataracts and infertility problems near radar units. The heart of the debate is over what are called thermal versus non-thermal effects. The electromagnetic spectrum, I'm going to do a crash course in bioelectromagnetics here, is traditionally divided into ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation, which you're all familiar with, includes solar rays, X-rays, nuclear activities, things like that. It's known to have enough power to knock electrons off of cellular orbits and thereby cause genetic mutations. Those exposures, by the way, are known to be cumulative over a lifetime. But non-ionizing radiation, which includes everything from the visible light frequencies all the way down to the Earth's natural electromagnetic fields, are thought not to have enough power to do that. The non-ionizing bands have been deemed safe if they are kept under certain thresholds for tissue heating and electric shock. But that safety premise is false. Non-ionizing radiation can cause a host of biological effects below those thresholds. No one disputes thermal effects. Radiofrequency radiation can and does heat tissue, just like a microwave oven. The only debate is over whether there are adverse non-thermal effects. What are they, and can they be reversed? The human anatomy, think about it for a minute, is an electrical organism. The heartbeat is electrical, brain waves are electrical, critical stages of cell division itself are electrically influenced. There's not much that happens in the human body that isn't electrical in one way or another. But the distinctions between forms of radiation may be more for the precision of the physics community than for the accuracy of biology models. Researchers are finding more and more multisystemic effects at lower intensities all the time, and these non-ionizing exposures appear to be cumulative as well. There may, in fact, be no safe threshold for low-level non-ionizing radiation, just like the National Academy of Sciences has said that there is no safe threshold for ionizing radiation. They issued a study last year that found that. The only difference may lie in specific exposure parameters that are not yet understood. The work of Drs. Henry Lai and N.P. Singh at the University of Washington in Seattle definitely points in that direction. Those researchers found both double and single-strand DNA breaks with low-level microwave exposures below heating thresholds. According to traditional theory, that is not supposed to be happening. Their work has been replicated in about 12 different studies now. All wireless devices need base stations to bounce signals. That's how it works. Concerns over the infrastructure that's needed to support all of this technology started at the federal level with the Telecommunications Act of 1996. That bill unleashed not only the whole wireless juggernaut that we appear to love so much, but it also created a kind of rolling nightmare for homeowners and local zoning commissions. Section 704 was written by lobbyists for the telecom industry, unfortunately. It was among, in fact, one of the most destructive pieces of legislation as a journalist that I've seen in my career. That clause literally eviscerated the reason we have zoning in the first place. All state statutes identify the purpose of zoning as the responsibility to protect the health, safety, and welfare of a community. But the industry knew that without taking the health piece off the table, this build-out could never occur. They knew that once local officials look at the science, they do not approve towers near residences or schools, period. The placement of towers is a very contentious issue at the local level. I'm sure that every congressional office has heard from constituents about it. Property devaluation and health concerns are always at the top of the list. Few people realize that key questions about the safety of radiofrequency radiation have never been settled. Despite what anyone says, no safe level of RF has ever really been determined. Unfortunately, there is a growing segment of the population that has become hypersensitive to these exposures. People report sleeplessness, hypervigilance, rashes, concentration problems, headaches, and a range of other symptoms people do not even have an agency to report symptoms to. In fact, most doctors do not know that these exposures should be considered as environmental factors. Low-level ambient RF is now associated with some of the fastest rising complaints in doctors' offices, including headaches and sleep disorders, asthma and allergies, autism, and a host of deadly neurotransmitter diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS. There is a big disconnect with doctors when it comes to this because most of the information is contained in biophysics journals, not a place where MDs typically read. What are we doing to ourselves? And more specifically, what are we doing to other species too? RF, even at extremely low intensities, is a known active genotoxin, meaning that it can and does damage DNA and that of other species as well. We should not fool ourselves. This is not an environmental freebie. Within the last 10 years, we have completely altered the electromagnetic signature at the Earth's surface with power densities and signaling characteristics that simply do not exist in nature, and this is all done with a presumption of safety that should not be made. We may already be seeing the law of unintended consequences with other applications of this. Species extinctions have accelerated to a rate never seen before. There are studies that find that wildlife abandons areas when cell towers go in. There are plausible theories that say that ambient RF may play a role in a whole colony collapse of honeybees. That's a big one these days. Low-level electromagnetic fields are known to throw bees off of their natural course, navigational course. One health policy analyst that I worked with recently recognized immediately that with the big-ticket illnesses like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, and brain tumors associated with low-level RF, that wireless technology may have the ability to actually sync the healthcare system. Back in 1975, long before computers and cell phones and Wi-Fi, Dr. William Bice found severe alterations in human electroencephalograms at RF power levels that are now common in most urban areas. It was a small study using 10 human test subjects, but over a year's period of time at extremely low power levels, Bice documented the entrainment of test subjects' brain waves with the microwave bands. Reactions entailed radical changes in mood and behavior, including rage reactions. Think of that the next time that somebody flips out on an airplane or shoots up a school. Think of that entrainment. Most of the newer technologies are functioning specifically in those wave bands. There are indications that some frequencies may be unsafe at any intensity. Exposures to electromagnetic fields have been found to interact with every system of the body. This is an important point when someone argues that turning down the power is all that's required. At power densities comparable to living within 1,000 feet of a cell tower, studies now show impaired fertility, numerous cancers, links with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS, immune system suppression, increased permeability of the blood-brain barrier, serotonin and melatonin suppression, and increases in free radical production. None of this is something that you want. And none of this research that I just mentioned is currently included in the FCC standards, which officially take no work after 1986 into consideration. And no regulatory agency is collecting information on what these technologies may be doing to people. There's no post-surveillance activity by any of the agencies. Collecting hazards data should not be left up to private entrepreneurs with an eye toward class action litigation, as is now the case. There needs to be immediate government oversight. Senator Leahy also had a very good bill a few years back that called for the removal of Section 704. Hopefully that bill will be resurrected as it goes right to the heart of the matter regarding states' rights and citizen protection. In the meantime, there is an RF interagency work group with representatives from FCC, EPA, FDA, OSHA, NTIA, NIOSH, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They said that the FCC standards are dosimetry-based, not biologically based. That's an important point. That means that the standards are written more for how to make the systems work than for the biology systems in its path. That's you and me and every other living thing. But as the professionals who help write the legislation, you have an ethical obligation to get this one right. Constituents back home are really relying on you, as are the regulatory agencies. And I thank you.
So, there's nonstop 24/7 radiation beaming into our bodies and the environment. I urge you all to take literature, but this is really interesting. We did, Joan and I and several others, along with our guru Pasca, who's not with us tonight. We measured connectivity and we measured radiation. All around, is she here? No, the study's right there. Okay, great. All around Brookfield, and we did one right next to my house, between me and Tara, actually. And there's the tower, 225-foot tower on Carmen Hill Road. And the radiation measured extremely hazardous. So it's way, way over the curve. And that only has, I don't know how many antennas on it, but it's really beaming down on us from all directions. And we're in this very idyllic place looking out over the lake, and we're being radiated. So we found that there's no significant gap in our connectivity. And there's very high radiation already in Brookfield. We have 35 towers and 142 antennas in our little town of 20 square miles already. And that's with 3G, 4G, not even 5G yet. Although we don't know, because I think that big 225-foot tower was originally a radio tower. And I guess they come in the middle of the night and they keep putting antennas on. So, who knows? Anyway, the next video is,
When?
yes.
Just one of no, I don't think most of the people were here when we met with the siting council when they first brought it to us in August, and I asked them, I said, so are you just, they're claiming it's only 4G, but he said clearly, if there's a record, it would show, they can add 5G, and what's to come after at 6G. And
Yeah,
they don't have
yes.
to give us notice at all, they could just make the upgrade, and that's it.
Right.
Once they get approved, they could do whatever
They
they want
want.
on that tower.
Yes.
And they made that statement clean and free
Yes.
here.
And actually, it's not just Vale Road. Now
High school's gonna
they
get
want to
one
put the
too,
high
yeah.
school, and they're taking down 6 antennas, and they're going to replace those with hybrid 5G.
At
So-
Four Corners.
Is that at Four Corners? So that's why we're here. That's why we're trying to educate everybody, because yes, they're going to do whatever they want, but
So just to be clear, it's not going on the high school property.
Not yet.
As long as I'm here, it will not go on the high school property. But they've already procured private interest for a private landowner to put another tower on their private property.
can we wait till after to, yeah, and we can discuss everything. I just interjected those things for right now. So our next video is Dr. Kent Chamberlain on the New Hampshire 5G Commission findings and wireless safety. In 2019, the New Hampshire House of Representatives passed HB 522. It was passed by the New Hampshire Senate and signed into law by New Hampshire Governor. HB 522 formally established a commission to study the environmental and health effects of 5G. The result was a comprehensive 390-page final report entered into the NH General Court and Government Archive. Their findings are summarized into 15 specific recommendations, and these are printed and displayed today. Are they on the walls?
On the table.
On the table, sorry. Okay, so this video, it's a rather long video, but we've narrowed it down to about 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's an excerpt of a presentation from Dr. Kent Chamberlain, who is a member of the formal New Hampshire Commission on 5G. His doctorate is from Ohio University, specializing in computational electromagnetics. His bio is extensive. His credentials are publicly available. So here he gives, he's quite a scientist, he gives a layman explanation of the potential path and reach of one individual antenna. And we picked this because it shows how it travels. The antennas can be placed on rooftops, steeples, masts, or in our case, a tower. The pending Vale Road tower starts with 9 antennas and can go up to 30. By the way, I told you we already have 35 towers and 142 antennas. So, this is Dr. Kevin Chamberlain. Kent, sorry.
What I want to do next is take a breath and now get to answering the question that I suspect, well, I was asked to provide an answer to, and that is this site right here. Here's the Curtis building, you all know it, or I suspect you all know it, and you can see the surrounding building. And as I understand it, what is being proposed is they're going to go on to a chimney or something like that and put up a tower. It's going to be put in, or not a tower, they're going to put up an antenna that's going to provide coverage for much of the town, or perhaps a lot more of the town. So as you look at this, I want to mention to you, give you a little sense of my background. My career, over 40 years, I've spent looking at scenarios like this. And that is, if you have a particular configuration, the configuration of the buildings, you have a particular antenna placement with a particular antenna pattern, what signal are you going to receive? Well, that's what computational electromagnetics is all about, and it involves putting this information into a computer, letting it plug and crank, and getting the answer. So I'm really familiar with how much of a signal you'd receive. Now, one thing that was said is that, or at least I've heard people say, and this is people from the telecom industry, and that is if you have your antenna here, it's going to be so narrow that it's going to project the energy out to the horizon. Now, if you think about this a little bit, that's kind of ridiculous, because if you have a narrow beam of energy and it goes out to the horizon, it's not going to hit your customers. You're not going to get reception. So that's kind of ridiculous to suggest that you would have a beam so thin that it's going to go out to the horizon. No. Let's take a look at what is realistic, though, and let's put our antenna pattern, this site right here, where we intend to, or where the intention is to put an antenna. So here's what the pattern would look like. Clearly, the main radiation is going to be in this direction right here, perhaps towards the horizon. However, you've got substantial radiation that's going down. Now, admittedly, this is a log plot, and these signals are pretty far down, but you are so close to the antenna that you're going to have very strong radiation in this direction. Now, understand that they thought about putting an antenna like this on the building, on the Curtis building 20 years ago, and they decided not to because they were concerned that the radiation from the antennas would cause problems with the medical instrumentation and pacemakers. And they were right. They decided not to do it, and I hope that's the case for now, because putting an antenna on would produce very strong radiation in the building. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about why that is. So you see that you have strong radiation here, and you have radiation that's going to illuminate this building right here. Is that City Hall? So you're going to get strong radiation towards City Hall. And one thing that I definitely can tell you, and that is at these frequencies, at cell phone frequencies, even rough surfaces, rough to the eye, are pretty reflective because of the size of the wavelength. They're reflective at cell phone frequencies. So what would happen, and what will happen if you put an antenna there, is you're going to get reflection. It'll strike the building. Now, a lot of energy will go into that building, but remember, this is a very strong signal. It's going to reflect back, hit the street, reflect back here, and you're going to get significant radiation inside the building. You can't avoid it. Other factors that you need to know about is, I'm going to remove the antenna there, the pattern, is look at this edge right here. This edge, or edges, go all the way around buildings. And so if you have an antenna here, signal from the antenna will illuminate that edge, and perhaps you've heard of knife-edged refraction. And so what's going to happen is that energy is going to diffract around and get radiated into the building. The bottom line here is, if you put an antenna on a building like this, you're going to get major, significant radiation inside the building. But hey, do I have to go through all this analysis to answer that question? Don't we know from previous experience what has happened in other facilities? The answer is yes. Go to California. And in that case, they put antennas on or near, so in this case, on fire stations. Here they put tower antennas near it on a mast. These were directional antennas that were supposed to take the energy away from the antenna so it wouldn't radiate the people inside the building. So we have examples of what's happened in the past, and I hope this is an example that doesn't get repeated in Curtis, because let's look what happened to them. What happened when cell towers were placed in stations, on fire stations? Let me read this if you don't mind, and that is, within a week of installation, many firefighters developed unusual symptoms of headaches, fatigue, insomnia, memory loss, confusion, nausea, and weakness. After a time, firefighters in stations with adjacent cell towers were found to have forgotten CPR or became lost responding to a fire in the city where they grew up. Now, one thing I want to point out is, do you recognize these symptoms from anything nearby you? Talk to the people in Pittsfield. That's what they reported too. A cell tower got put in, cell tower got turned on, and these are the symptoms that they had. These are symptoms typical, and I'll show you a scientific study on these symptoms in just a little bit. It's also kind of insidious that you have problems like this, because you can look at those symptoms and say, well, gosh, isn't that part of everyday life? And yeah, there are other things that can cause that. But cell phone radiation, cell tower radiation are things that can definitely cause it. And here's just an example of it. This is what happened in California. So another question. So I'm going to now.
Okay. Okay, that was illuminating. So as antennas are added, there's no oversight of the increasing cumulative radiation. And after watching this video, please keep in mind the people most acutely affected by these initial 9 and later 30 antennas. The homes and businesses, including the children and the daycare or daycares.
Cares, yeah.
Two of them? Two daycares that are 0.38 miles from the proposed Vale Road site. And remember, 5G requires antennas to be placed every 150 to 300 feet. It's at like a block every 2 or 3 blocks.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so you can start seeing them on your telephone poles. And it's throughout every community and neighborhood, including yours and mine.
Yep.
All right, this is our last one. This is Dr. Hugh Taylor of Yale Medicine on cell phone radiation, pregnancy, and brain impacts. He directs the Yale Center for Reproductive Biology. Dr. Hugh Taylor, you can look him up also. Here he describes a study focusing on the radio frequency effects on reproduction, gestation, and children. These include genetic, DNA level alterations, and a gamut of neurological and behavioral alterations. Note the information is pertinent to both sexes and present and future generations. Again, please bear in mind the proximity of the Vale Tower with up to 30 antennas on children in the nearby daycare centers, in our homes, our businesses, and our youth.
We saw a lot of studies in humans about correlations between cell phone use and behaviors and behavioral alterations, ADHD, behavioral alterations like that in children of women who are on their cell phones a lot during their pregnancy. So I started to wonder whether that really was causative. There are people who dismiss some of those studies. Well, of course, if a woman's talking on her cell phone all the time and ignoring her kids, they're going to have behavioral problems. No, we thought it would be a lot more than that, that there probably really would be cause and effect. So we did an animal study, and we were the first to do a study to specifically look in a mouse model. And here we just took regular old cell phones that everyone was using, put them on top of the cage, the mice that were pregnant, or had a cell phone that was deactivated on top of the cages of half the mice in separate rooms, and just similar to human exposure, and exposed to these cell phones throughout their pregnancy. Nothing, same genetically background mice, the same environment, the same diet. There are no other confounders in there that would have potentially interfered with this. The only variable that was different is whether they had that cell phone on or not. So we could really say it was caused by the cell phone. And this is what we found. I'm sorry, this may be a little bit small for those of you to see, but the first one here looks at memory, and the one with the open circles are those that had the cell phone exposure. And you can see that their memory was decreased. They were much more hyperactive, and their anxiety was actually lower. So they were bouncing off the walls, not remembering what they're doing, but didn't have a care in the world. It didn't bother them. So again, very, very similar to what we see ADHD. So a good mouse study that really proved that. Others have done that, and I won't go through all these because I think it'll overlap a little bit with our next speaker, but there are other studies that have come on since this time that have seen those same sort of correlations in women, especially women who are pregnant, who use cell phones during their pregnancy, and children having various behavioral problems due to that cell phone exposure. And other animal species, even the zebrafish model has been used as well, where you can expose a fish to cell phone radiation and see various types of abnormalities, including the type of behavioral abnormalities we saw in mice. So it's correlative in humans, and we see it very clearly in our mouse models, and it affects all sorts of other species as well. This is broadly applicable. Really don't use your cell phone or wireless laptop, certainly on your abdomen. A laptop probably shouldn't be on the lap, especially if you're pregnant. And keep it away from you. Don't sleep near your cell phone. Put it away from you when you're in your car driving. Put it on the other side. Turn it off. Put it on non-broadcasting airplane mode whenever possible. And just generally minimize your exposure, especially when you're pregnant. Especially keep it away from your abdomen, because the fetus really is vulnerable. I want to say we'll never have perfect evidence in women. So we're not going to expose women to things that we think are harmful and test whether it's harmful or not. We're not going to do those experiments. It's going to be correlative experiments. And somebody will always say, well, the women using the cell phones, the women exposed to this particular chemical had all these other exposures. How do you know that was really what's causing it? And you can't in these human studies. But in animal studies, we can do that. We can isolate it so they're completely identical. Again, the same genetic background, the same diet, the same exercise regimen, the same light-dark time. Everything you can think of, these animals are identical except this one exposure. Whether it's one of the endocrine disruptors I talked about, whether it's the cell phone radiation, we can do those experiments and we can show that it's cause and effect. There's nothing else different between those two groups, and one has these adverse outcomes. So when these two align, I think we have pretty convincing evidence that when you show its cause and effect in an animal, and when you also see the correlations in people, I think we can be pretty convinced that really this is truly causal in humans, and we need to watch out, and we need to be more careful. What I've shown you, though, is just really the tip of the iceberg. I've talked about a few hormone-disrupting chemicals that I know about and have studied, and we know about quite a few. But there are many more out there. We live in a sea of thousands of chemicals. Our exposures to various electromagnetic fields is increasing and changing. I think these are all things that we really need to study more carefully. And although we don't have all the answers, we know that environmental exposures clearly play a role in the health of the next generation. And there are things we can do now to protect the next generation from these exposures that may not even be manifest till decades from now, but we need to think and act now to prevent and protect our children. So we can already identify some things.
So protect our children. These are the videos that we chose for this evening, sort of as a beginning to inform the public who may not know a lot about magnetic field or electromagnetic radiation and what's happening very quickly in the world, in our town, in our state, and what we can do as the people to try to alleviate the problems that are occurring and stop this. But I won't go any further, and I will turn it over to Austin.
Very good. Cool. Well, thank you. Thanks for everybody for coming. We appreciate it. And thanks to Joan and Gwen and everybody else that made this event happen. It was not easy. I'm sure I came to this kind of late, so happy to be a part of it. But and also thanks to everybody watching on the live feed. We appreciate you guys for tuning in, and again for you guys for coming out. I know it's not easy to come out on a Tuesday night, so thank you so much. Events like this are ways we are able to discuss and debate issues locally. It's a way we can move forward. It's a way we can get stronger. In a way I think we can really inspire change here in town and more likely within this state, right? And I think if there's any town that can do it, it's Brookfield. So again, thanks for coming. To go back to the first video we watched with Blumenthal, And I just want to go over that quote again, where he said, with the potential for millions of small cell sites, and there will be millions in Connecticut, the question is, are there any health and public safety implications to those sites that will be located close to homes, schools, and workplaces? Obviously, with the videos we just watched, there's a clear yes to that answer, and clearly it shows that it is bad for your health, especially amongst the children. And I like that Gwen brought up with the 60 Vale Road Tower. It's right next to Country Kids, which has an accredited daycare, which I'm sure I went there as a kid. I'm sure a lot of our kids went there. And they're there, 12 hours a day, some of those kids. So really not safe health-wise. On top of that, I want to talk about what the Connecticut Siting Council is, to the best of my knowledge, and also what these 5G towers and antenna can have on real estate devaluation for Brookfield and for Connecticut. So if you guys haven't heard of the Siting Council, it's newer to me as well. You would be asking yourself what it is, how do they have these powers? It is an unelected legislative body that has exclusive jurisdiction over all telecommunications towers and substations for all of Connecticut. And I think, like Joan said earlier, no other state in the country has a council like this, right? So in essence, it's an increase to me of the administrative and bureaucratic state that Connecticut has become, if we're being honest, right? They have no oversight whatsoever. So this we have a problem with, and I think this is the big problem at large. So just recently, Senator Harding proposed a bill, SB 73, and on that bill it was stated to place a local representation on the council. There was a public hearing yesterday. I'm not sure what came with it. I know we spoke earlier, so we'll talk more about that. But and I thank Steve for doing that and appreciate that bill. With that bill, there was 24, 25 people writing in support of Senator Harding's bill, which I think is incredible and shows that people are fully engaged in doing that, and only 2 votes to oppose it, one coming from the legal representation of the Siting Council and the other from Eversource's legal representation as well. So I think that speaks volumes, right there. And if you want to have some fun, you can go and read the Siting Council's opposition to the bill. I find it pretty telling what they said, why they opposed that bill. But anyway, with that bill, what I think we need to focus on is to push that bill even further and push for an abolishment of the council altogether, especially when it comes to 5G towers and antenna control, and give that control and power back to our local municipalities, our governments here in town, our zoning boards, the people we actually vote for to represent us, right? I think that's the only way forward. Anything short of this, I just don't see much of a way of stopping these potential towers and antenna from littering the state for the next couple of years. We're gonna wake up in 3 years and it will be everywhere, right? So we've talked about health implications, talked a little bit about the environmental impact, which is pretty big as well. We talked about the Connecticut Siting Council, and just to wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about real estate valuation. So I find this part pretty interesting and something that we should talk about even more. So a few studies, and there's been a number of studies here in this book about it, and a number of surveys run. So this one I'm going to state is from the National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy. They conducted a survey titled Neighborhood Cell Towers and Antennas, and Do They Impact Properties' Desirability? So from this study, 94% reported that these towers in a neighborhood or on a building would impact interest in a property and the price people would be willing to pay. 80% reported back that under no circumstance at all would they ever purchase a property within a few blocks of a cell tower, or here I think is the key word, or an antenna, which again can be placed anywhere, not just on a 5G tower, right? And then from that survey, interesting, it was found 63% of respondents previously experienced physical effects from neighborhood towers and antennas, and 57% of people experience cognitive effects. So this is clearly affecting people's physical health, mental health, and then spiritual health, I would say as well. A second study done by the Appraisal Institute, which is the largest professional organization of appraisers, conducted a study that showed home buyers would be paying between 10 to 21% less for property if it were in the proximity of a tower, proximity wasn't defined. This could be 1,000 feet. I think it's probably going to end up being larger than that. There's studies coming out of California right now showing the same results, seeing about a 20% decrease in property valuation. So I think that would have a massively negative impact on Brookfield's tax revenue from a property tax standpoint. If our value goes down, obviously property tax goes down. So that's something that I think we should really be paying attention to and also just aware of, right? So last part that I want to say is just 3 questions that I've really been thinking about, putting it out there on social media a little bit, about the risk reward of these towers for us and really the direction the state is going. So the first question is, would you trade your health for one more bar of service on your cell phone? Because that's all I'm going to give you, and I think the answer is no for everybody here. The second is, would you buy a home with a 165-foot 5G tower in the neighborhood? And then if you did say yes, you would buy it, you're not going to be able to sell it, right? If you do, it's going to be at a reduced value. And then lastly, would you trade any privacy that we have left in the state for a sense of more connectivity with what the 5G towers and the smart grid that Connecticut is going to bring to us? So I believe if we make any of these trades, we're taking all the risk, we're getting none of the reward, and not to be a downer, but I see that as a dire future for the town and for the state at large. So this is something we really need to fight hard on, and health and safety has to win. So again, thanks everybody for coming. I think we're gonna open up for questions now, and yeah, thank you so much. Awesome.
Steve?
Are you in communication with other towns? Are there other groups like that you set up here?
Yeah, for sure.
As well, and
Yeah, we got some people here from other
okay, but I just want
towns.
to finish my question.
Yeah.
Are they familiar with this site council that's
For sure.
not elected, and are they also against what's going on?
Yeah, so I know Pasco's with Easton, right? And I know I've been talking to a woman who is from Canton, Connecticut, who has sent me a ton of information on how they've dealt with the 5G tower going in their town. So short answer is yes, and a ton of information, actually overwhelming amount of information she sent, is what they've done. And from a lot of the reports we have and how they dealt with local government and state government and the actions they took to put a stop to their towers going up, or at least put a pause on it into going up. So I'm speaking with that woman now from Canton, and again, Pasca is from Easton, correct?
And we have Sherman here,
Sherman here as well, yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, other
very
towns.
well aware.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, that we actually could have a reasonable low radiation area, because we have people who have been connected with us coming to some of our meetings and have been active in their own communities in Sherman and New Milford. And some of them are here tonight.
I've been in touch with the first selectman of Easton, who actually was successful in implementing a moratorium for the town, but it yields no results because the moratoriums become, it's just a pause. You really can't stop these towers from coming because of the site council.
How do we get rid of the siting council?
Through legislation, I'd be in full support of it. It's gonna be a huge uphill battle.
Steve.
There's so many towns that are willing to go up through the battle.
Do they?
That's why I propose what I propose, because it's a first step.
First step, yeah, for sure.
Start keeping
Except
the
Bill
Senate council.
73.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do we need to do to support that
So
further?
we already had the public hearing on it, and it was, Austin mentioned there was about 25 people in
Yeah.
favor. Only
Which is
2
huge.
people objected, and 2 corporations said so. The siting council themselves and Eversource. So I think what it shows is that your private residents and citizens strongly believe in it, and only the siting council themselves and companies that benefit from the siting council want it. So I certainly would contact, your state rep, Marty's the state rep for Brookfield, he's here.
Marty's here.
Still here.
And whatever towns you're in, and speak, I think now at this point I'm pretty confident we can get the bill out of the Environment Committee. But to email any legislators in the Environment Committee, I can get that information to Austin of who those individuals are. The biggest thing I can say as a legislator is hearing from your constituent. So if you reach out to somebody in let's say, East Hampton, whoever the state rep is out there or the state senator out there, they're probably not gonna give you a lot of, attention. But if you could find folks that are part of this organization in these individual towns, reaching out to their legislators, that goes a really far way. Because what you could say to them is, look, I could vote you in or I could vote you out. And
Where
I
will
really
it go
wanna see your
next?
support.
Where will the bill go?
So the bill is in the Environment Committee. The next step would be a vote on the bill in an Environment Committee meeting, which will be probably in the next 3 to 4 weeks. And then if it gets out of the Environment Committee, which I'm pretty confident it will, then it will go to a vote before the full House and the full Senate. And we're talking about a month or two down the road.
Steve, with that part, do you see it where up in Hartford is it bipartisan issue? Is it a partisan issue?
I think it depends on it can be bipartisan in
Yeah.
some respects. Unfortunately, in other respects, it can be partisan. I think
Right.
that generally, those that support the administration support more of the bureaucracies of
Right.
the administration,
Right,
and I
right.
think that's a challenge and a hurdle to this, to be honest.
I think that's a huge challenge.
I appreciate your efforts and your intentions, but if I understand it correctly, it's going to be a representative. Is it one, or is it one from every town? And they're not going to have any vote? And,
Well,
and
that's
so
the
I'm
bill.
wondering what impact it would really have on any kind of.
It would have an impact. I think that these meetings would have to hear from a member themselves that would have to talk about the residential aspect of it. And this is not just 5G or just towers. This would be anything before the siting council. I think the biggest problem with the siting council is it is completely bureaucratic, and they don't care about the residential impact at all. All they care about is that however benefits the entire system.
You think
throughout
this
the
would
state.
change their behavior?
Oh, I think absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a step in the right direction, put it
Yeah.
that way. It's better than what we have currently.
Yeah.
And ultimately, would I like to see the siting council abolished? Yes, of course. I believe in local control, as Austin had mentioned. I know Terry does as well. I speak for Marty as that as well. It's a step in the right direction, and that's what I'm looking for now. I'd like to eventually see if you put a bill in front of me to abolish the siting council and revert back to local control and all these issues. I'd 100% support it. But as we sit here today, what's that?
There is a bill being, with Ann Hughes is co-sponsoring.
Okay, and I'll co-sponsor that bill as well. I don't know where it's gonna go. And so I'm
Is it
trying to
going
also,
anywhere?
I think the effort is trying to address this as many fronts as possible. Because we need to get some progress here. Some progress is better than none. And I support Ann Hughes' bill. I'll look for that bill. If you can get me the bill number, I'll co-sponsor it.
Thank you.
Because I do believe in local control on all these issues.
Nadia?
Yeah, the question I have about that bill, since you're on it, so in it, it says, for proceedings involving any electric distribution company, I looked at the list, there's none of the cell phone companies on there. So, does it mean that the cell phone, it's just for the meetings with the electric distribution company, which would
No.
seem to just target
No,
the
that's not the intention.
Eversource,
Right.
not,
No, it's supposed to include all issues surrounding the siting council. So if that's how the bill was drafted, then that has to be amended. It's not just for electric.
because I did wrote in support of it, but that's what I wrote, because for most of people I know who are concerned, we're concerned about electric.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, and
Eversource,
that's what I'm
we're
more concerned about too.
about.
Yeah, so the bills can be amended, and I would work with you on that amendment to the bill. If you read it in any way and you think it excludes the cell phone companies or
That's how
anything.
Eversource read it too.
What's
Did you read-
that?
Did you read what Eversource wrote?
Yes, I did read what they- yeah,
That's how
so we-
they read it too.
Right, and I think the bill can be amended to address that, and I would support that bill.
Hi,
Sir.
My question is just to get a little history, the siting council that you're referencing,
Yes.
just wondering, like, how was that created? Was it something that the
That's-
towns and the
yeah,
state gave
that's-
that right away?
I don't know if you guys have the history or not, I'm not.
From the seventies.
Or
It's from the
because
'70s.
there was
if
like-
the towns gave it away, then
There was state
reclaim
legislation.
it in the same process,
Yeah, there was state legislation that created the siting council back in the early seventies.
way back when,
Yeah,
yeah.
and all these people are appointed over time, either by a governor or, the Speaker of the House, various people appoint people to these
this committee. And I think there was some change to the name, whatever it was previously became the Siting Council, I think in the 90s. And really, it does take the power away from the local zoning commission, which is why we're here.
Steve, that bill that Arcani wrote in 19,
Yeah.
6442, did that have anything to, that's when this was all getting rolled out? And does that have any role in giving the siting council more power? I tried to read through the bill, it's pretty detailed, I don't,
If you could email me the bill, I'll take a look. I
Okay.
can't off the top of my head.
Okay, it was for, it's titled, basically equity for broadband access, something along those lines, right?
And I think that probably has more to do with expanding coverage or expanding this as opposed
Yeah.
to limiting the
I'll send it to you, I just
Yeah.
thought maybe
I'll
some,
take a look at
I've
it.
seen some people who opposed it, brought up the giving away local control from that bill. I don't know, he now works for Eversource, as I'm sure you know, so like, I would say Eversource probably wrote the bill, he signed it, yeah. But I don't know, so I'll send it to you, it's long, I don't, I'm not sure of the language in there.
So, my thinking is, you know, this is something that, they were given power in the 70s, and
Right.
now we're in, you know, 2020.
Yeah.
50 years where they've grabbed more power than what they were given initially. And it's gone, I guess, unlegislated and it's basically.
There's no oversight. We called
No
the
oversight.
government, we called,
Who we elect.
no,
Nothing.
none.
They've just expanded their power.
And I'm not sure they've ever rejected an application.
Yes,
They have.
Remember Central?
One, just one? One.
It's pretty good.
There's
Million
another
ago.
question?
Do we know why Blumenthal went to being a real opponent or advocate for us against about these powers and the radiation to go in AOL, radio silence, you said?
Well, because Ned Lamont is supporting this,
Yeah.
and that's his baby.
I heard that he kind of backed down on it, but I don't think we know why. That he really didn't follow through with this at all, but it was interesting that he made those statements and publicly. I'd like to add that we've been taking a kind of, as a group, we've been developing a kind of another approach to dealing with this situation. We have one member in our group who has a legal background. She's not a lawyer, but she's very knowledgeable and energetic, and when she gets into something, she really gets into it. And she wrote a 9-page document called A Notice of Malfeasance and something else. Anyway, it's got a lot of constitutional law in it, and it's got a lot of references to specific court cases. I haven't even, she rewrote it several times. She worked with, there's a woman named Pasca who's had several serious health problems, which she worked for IBM, and she feels it had to do with all the electronics and stuff. And she's also hypersensitive. She can get like knocked out and have to be in bed for days if she's near a tower or if she's near a small cell installation or anything like that. And she started a Facebook page for the entire state about this issue, and it's still in process. And she's the one who got a moratorium in Easton, and she's also extremely knowledgeable. And she worked with this woman, Cheryl, who wrote this. They went through it together and reworded it, and we have it here. And at the end of the document is a place for signatures. So if you, I made a couple of copies of the document if you want to take a quick look at it or read the first page. What it basically is holding people responsible for their actions. And it's a kind of a legal document, when we want to send it out, we're sending it out to Lamont and to the head of the Siting Council and to several other officials that were
think we're
chosen. And then we send copies to them, we keep the original. If you sign it, it has to be in blue ink. I brought a couple of pens that are blue, because that shows that it's not a copy, I guess. And the people who receive it are required to reply and defend their position within 10 days. And if they don't do that, I think there's a next step, and a next step maybe. And at some point, it becomes a legal document that's been accepted as truth, because they can't really deny what they're doing. And there's also ways, even though the courts are not so great, there are ways to use the Constitution in a legal case where you can get good results. I've read some stuff, interesting stuff about that. And we've also spoken to a lawyer. His name is Andrew Caponelli. He's in New York, on Long Island, I think. He used to have a Connecticut license, and he can renew it without any charge. We've spoken to him. He specialized in this area for, I think, 20 years. And he particularly likes to help communities instead of doing individual lawsuits. So he doesn't charge as much, I guess. And he's an expert in that. He's really would love to take down the Siting Council, he told us. He hates it. And
Homeland Towers, which is the builder for Vail.
So we would like to be prepared if this tower gets approved for Vail Road, and we're sending out these papers and they don't respond to them for their behaviors and their actions. We would like to take it to court and sue the state and get something done. So we're going to be collecting donations, you know, because we all have to chip in on this. Yes.
Is this similar to a NOLA, a notice of liability?
Yeah, I guess you'd call it that, a notice of liability. What is it called?
Can we turn it
They've changed the name of it a few times, but now it's called